The following is a presentation of CGS, the CanWest Global System, based on the book Media Focus, published by Cop Clark Pittman Limited.
The news is good on the roads again this morning around the city. We've had no accidents to report. Downtown, traffic volume still light. And
for Carol Bruman, being an assignment editor means being on top of the latest news developments, even before she arrives at work.
Doug Archer says it's a horror story.
Each morning I come in and I decide, what are the must stories of the day. I'm constantly listening to radio newscasts, and I'm reading wire copy to find out what's happening at any given time. For background information, I'll read newspapers, all 3 Toronto dailies, and a wide variety of magazines, because I want to know what's happening in Toronto, across the province, throughout Canada and the rest of the world. And I check to see which reporters are working, and I try to match the right assignment with the reporter who's got the right skills for that assignment.
Early mornings are also a way of life for News at Noon producer Larry Jackson. During the next few crucial hours, he will coordinate the many details involved in putting together a daily live 1-hour broadcast.
People died when a construction crane collapsed on a busy street.
I have to fill myself up with all the various bits and pieces of stories that are happening in the world on a day, so that when it finally comes time to make the decisions around 9 o'clock in the morning on what goes in the newscast or what doesn't go in the newscast, that I have this whole selection, the whole menu of the world's information in front of me. One of the hallmarks of a modern newsroom is that we have services available to us that we pay for around the world that are providing information to us. NBC News, CNN, and an organization called Westinghouse in the States, and Viz News providing us with European information. As well, we have our own global Ottawa bureau providing material off of Parliament Hill every day, and a string of cooperating news stations right across Canada, feeding stories into Global Centre.
In 1987, they weren't numbered.
Now, the important task of assigning reporters to camera crews begins.
Okay, so basically if we could just reserve cameras for Joy Melvin, David...
Throughout the day, news personnel will monitor information from many different sources. Police radio reports provide details of accidents or other police-related emergencies.
3302-829.
Before drawing up his final lineup for the News at Noon, producer Larry Jackson has a meeting with Carol Bruman to discuss last-minute additions.
You won't have a story out of Winnipeg on the NDP convention.
Right.
I've called New Brunswick like you asked, and they're going to get back to me on when Peterson is meeting with McKenna. Yeah, but it's
8:30 in the morning, and the first of 3 daily news meetings is about to begin. In this session, the assignment editor meets with the news director and senior producer to cover what she thinks are the most newsworthy stories of the day.
I think one of the strongest stories we have today is a follow to the auditor's report. I figured we could put Joy Melvin on that story. It
sounds simplistic, but news is what's new. I don't think I kid myself about what news is. Television news is basically a headline service that provides you the basic minimum of information that you need. I would hate to think that anyone is relying just on television news.
By 9, News at Noon anchor Lisa Whitmore arrives. Camera crews check assignments, and reporter Joy Melvin meets with the assignment editor to discuss her story for the day.
I think the lead story today is going to be on the auditor's report, and he really came down hard on the fact that there's needy children in the province.
Queen's Park Bureau Chief Robert Fisher reports there are horror stories.
Later, the News at Noon producer meets with his anchor to discuss what stories will be contained in the broadcast that day.
There are basically 4 ways that you can handle any given piece of information. You can do it as a full-up reporter story. The reporter's out in the field, he's filed a whole item, it's 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes long, and the anchor is only required to read an intro to that item. The reporter takes it away from there. That's one. The second way to do it is a stripe. That is, the anchor pre-records the script. We take the visuals and marry them specifically together. It gives it the strength of a reporter's story. Number 3 is a voiceover where we have some visuals, some information, can't marry them together quite properly, still have to get it on the air. And number 4, when we either don't have the visuals or the story isn't quite important enough but still deserves attention on the air, we simply have the anchor read the material straight to camera. We call that a brief.
Okay, well, what we're going to do is we're doing a press conference at 11 o'clock on the Children's Aid Society and the Auditor General's report.
Before going out on the road, reporter Joy Malbin briefs her cameraman, giving him details of the shoot.
Okay, so why don't we leave shortly? The day can begin many, many ways, but the usual way is you come in, you go to the assignment editor first off, and she'll tell me what I'm assigned to do. Maybe we'll have a few seconds to discuss different angles, what we should do. Maybe someone will have contacts. Inga will assign me a camera, and then I'm off and running.
Sorry, hi, how are you?
Yeah, maybe in a half hour, give them another call. So when you see me running around with pulling my hair out, that's because I've got 1,000 things going through my mind about who I've got to call, what kind of answers I have to get, and I'm thinking about time, always thinking about time, because there's that deadline click, click, clicking back in your head.
That leaves Toy Testing Council and English Plant. I think we do English Plant.
As the final lineup for the 12 o'clock newscast is locked into place, other members of the Noon News anchor team arrive to begin their busy day. Editing is underway while producer Larry Jackson discusses one of the entertainment reports.
He's describing all the beautiful jewelry and the reveal right there.
I mean, you want to start off with the...
En route to her first location, Joy Malbin discusses her story approach with her cameraman. Entertainment editor and anchor Bob McAdory reviews the morning's lineup.
Cartier jewelry story, which she shot Monday night, which I've thrown into your pack today. This is Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous.
Yes, I need to buy some Cartier.
Yeah,
for
like you got $60,000 to spare. You're going to buy Colleen a little bauble for Christmas. Stand by.
Hundreds of pieces of mail are sorted while writers sit reviewing videotape for which they must write voiceover copy.
Harlem Knights got a surprise visit from Internal Revenue agents yesterday. They seized nearly all of his belongings, including at least 7 cars. They even took the jewelry that Fox was wearing.
Arriving at her first location of the day, Joy Malbin has a half hour to set up before taping her 11 o'clock Children's Aid Society news conference.
Okay, this morning Joy's out and she's doing the follow to the auditor's report.
It's now mid-morning, and the second major meeting to discuss the day's events has begun. Key members of the news team, producers, anchors, and department heads have joined to discuss specific story ideas and their approach.
Lip treatment. It's like a lipstick. Yeah? Yeah, it comes in a little blue tube. And I put some on this morning of my own. I forgot.
With less than an hour before the live noon broadcast, anchor Lisa Whitmore receives final touch-ups. In an adjacent room, the morning news meeting concludes with anchor Thalia Ashuris discussing the day's live coverage of an NDP convention in Winnipeg.
I don't think we should start till the...
4 o'clock updated schedule for manana.
Okay.
I don't think we should start till the convention starts. The convention doesn't start till tomorrow morning.
Negatives of the job, it's totally unpredictable. I've never worked less than an 11-hour day in my life. I never know when I'm going to have to work or not have to work. There's no such thing as nights or weekends. You're always on call, and that can create burnout. You don't see a lot of older people in the news business. If you look around our newsroom, you'll be amazed. People tend to be amazed at how young people are. And I think the same is true of all newsrooms. There are very few people who retire in the news business. But everything that I said that's negative is also positive. I mean, it's a rush. It's a constant rush. You can't, because it's constantly changing, because there's always that pressure on. You always feel like you're doing something important. You always feel like you're involved, and it's not necessarily ever the same thing. I don't know how many jobs you can come into every day and know coming in that what you do today is completely different from what you did yesterday.
It's 20 minutes before air. Studio director Miriam Graham meets with her crew as final preparations and checks are made before the broadcast.
Yeah, go find it, because 12 and 15 are the mystery stories at this point.
Anchor Lisa Whitmore makes one final check of her script to familiarize herself with every aspect of each story. In these last few crucial minutes, details are checked and double-checked to ensure a smooth broadcast.
And L13, 14 is out, 15 to come, but it will be a J, John, okay?
It's 11:57. Tensions mount. Each member of the control room are in place for a short rehearsal of the opening of the newscast.
A review of the refugee law after almost a year. Bob?
Take one.
It's Lisa David Wood, our
And we
fine food
key
expert.
put the right key.
To tantalize our taste buds
The rehearsal
once again.
complete,
10,
the production
9,
assistant counts down the
8,
final
7,
few seconds
6,
before broadcast.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And up. Ready for.
Demands more reforms. Olympic darling Nadia Coleman.
The newscast now in progress. Each member of the news team goes about their job quietly and efficiently.
Roll green. 24. Through to 4. Audio cut. Ready 3.
With John Daw, Bob McAdory, and Lisa Whitmore.
And mix to 3.
Also ahead, the new refugee law. Is it working? Sean Mallon continues his series on immigration.
Go ahead.
En route to her second location, Joy Malvin receives details of her next interview.
This woman was worried that her house looked filthy and they're doing construction and stuff. So she didn't want shots inside. I said, well, that's okay, we can probably do it outside, et cetera, et cetera.
Their natural homes. Can we just pick it up at the third paragraph? Children's aid officials agreed today. Drop the first two paragraphs. Children, no, just children's aid.
Back in the newsroom, last-minute script changes are being made.
One of the biggest problems in an hour live news show is that it must start at precisely the right instant to the second, and it must end at precisely the right instant to the second. My production assistant in the front row, who is constantly timing all of the items and all of the bits and pieces of copy and tape and all the rest, is giving me in the back row a constant running time on where 20 seconds heavy or 30 seconds light. It's my job to know the content of that show really well so that I can make choices on, okay, we're 2 minutes heavy, we have to cut 2 minutes out of this show, so we can do it by taking this whole package out, just throw it out the window, or by, we'll trim 15 off of that, 30 off of that, 30 off of that, and the chat at the end of the show disappears. The entire ball game can change in a heartbeat, and often does.
Lisa, coming up, Christmas gift ideas for the woman who has everything and more.
It's 12:50. Joy Malvin and her cameraman are setting up to shoot a key interview with a foster parent. Portions of this interview will serve as a focus for a 2-minute story which will air later that evening.
When did you start becoming a foster parent? 1979. 1979? Do you keep in touch with them still? Yes. Your foster kids?
Well, one of them we just married off in the fall.
Really?
Yes.
That's nice.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back here again tomorrow. Hope you will be too. Bye-bye.
Beautiful. It's cold, though.
As long as it's sunny. I could care if it's
One successful broadcast completed, the focus in the newsroom now shifts to the 90-minute news package, where editorial assistants are busy gathering the endless wire copy.
An editorial assistant is the first job you get when you come into the newsroom. It's very much a bottom of the ladder job. I suppose the most specific thing we do is information distribution. I mean, any kind of information coming into the newsroom, we see it first, and we have to get it to the necessary people up the ladder. You can't be easily offended. You have to be pretty tough, and you have to be able to take all the flack that's going to come your way. But in no way, shape, or form do I think there's any glamour at this level. I think the glamour perhaps is what you're exposed to and the information that you have at your disposal. One of the things an editorial assistant has to do is overnights. And you're the only person in the newsroom over the whole midnight to 8 in the morning. So that's sort of exciting because you are responsible for anything that comes across the wires or anything that comes across the radio. And I remember my my keen parents thinking that they hoped that the CN Tower would drop or something of that nature when I was on overnights, because that would be my big break.
So I believe the NDP convention will look like this. Richard will open with a stripe on 5:30, and then
It's late in the afternoon, and the third news meeting of the day is well in progress.
She was great. They were both
On
really
the road, reporter Joy Malbin and her cameraman have finished their interview. The only detail that remains is to choose a location to shoot an introduction to the story.
So where do you want to do your stand-up?
Back in the newsroom, lineup editor Mark Truman swings into action.
As lineup editor, first thing I do is I check what's available internationally for the newscast. I attend the editorial meetings in which they describe what's available domestically. I check wire copy through the day, and by early afternoon I'm in a position to put together a lineup. Okay, after the 3 o'clock meeting, we get down to writing the show, which is the parts the anchors read, is what we write. The reporters all write their own scripts, but the parts that the anchors read, we are responsible for, and that can be intros to items or voiceovers or briefs. That writing is assigned, and I'll give the writers wire copy relating to what they're writing, and let them know where the information can be found.
With only 90 minutes before her first broadcast, news anchor Thalia Ashuras discusses a live news update she must do shortly with co-anchor Richard Brown in Winnipeg.
Yeah. I don't know if it's live to tape or whether we leave a space, but well, I love going live. I mean, I think there's nothing like live television, and that's the best kind of television that there is. I'm very lucky, you know, knock on wood, that I tend not to get really nervous before I go on the air.
For her live update, Thalia must wear an earpiece.
Well, the earpiece is, in my particular case, actually, Richard doesn't like the one that's molded to your ear, but I have one that's, Victoria, our makeup person, had to put the wax in my ear and get a mold of it. And it literally fits in, I suppose, like a hearing aid. It's got a wire that comes back behind the ear, so you're not really supposed to see it. You use the earpiece in order to be able to do interviews with people who are not in the building. If someone, you know, Richard Brown is in Winnipeg doing the NDP convention, he and I have to talk. I have to hear him.
I have to cut you off, Richard, sorry.
Yeah, 45 seconds between you and Richard, okay?
Well, nobody told me we were doing that, but okay.
Okay.
Do you want me to ask you about the infighting on this 45 seconds?
Yeah, that they want you to ask. He's got a 10-second setup, and then first question they want you to ask is about the infighting.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you meant for the 5:30. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
At the end of page 3, turn to camera 1.
Okay, here's the tape, so I'll go out and shoot those kids. Well, good luck on the edit.
Thanks, Max.
See ya.
As Joy prepares to edit her story, graphic artists are already busy designing the visuals for the evening's newscast.
9 seconds. I'll give you a 9-second count through this.
As far as I go on. They're going. It's Richard.
Okay, Ted? Okay, Richard can go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cue him. 9, 8, 7.
By the time an update of the live NDP convention coverage is completed, additional members of the news team have arrived in preparation for the evening's broadcast.
And in 2 hours from now, I'll be meeting with the producer of the show, plus the writers, and we'll go over what is described as a lineup. The lineup, of course, is the order of stories, and so on and so forth. And that's just another day in the life of.
So we're going to start. So Don Martin did a story on the Leafs, but they're on the road.
That's right. Tonight the
By late afternoon, the Sportsline personnel are already busy compiling stories and visual clips to be featured in the evening's broadcast.
Chicago or St. Louis?
It's a 5-game trip.
They go.
Painstaking care is taken to coordinate each script with the appropriate visuals.
In Calgary Saturday and then in Edmonton on Sunday.
Downstairs, reporter Joy Malbin prepares to screen the day's tapes to select the clips she'll need for her story.
It wasn't what most reporters would call a fantastic story, but that particular day we had a press conference. Press conferences are boring. Nobody likes press conferences. So I thought, how do you bring this story home? How do you personalize this story? So my main concern was finding a foster parent, someone who could talk from the soul and explain to me, you know, what's in her heart. Why does she do this job? She gets paid like $8 a day.
A news reporter for over 8 years, Joy knows just what it takes to be a success.
I never give up. That's part of my problem. I've always been told that I suppose I'm tenacious, but I don't give up. And if I phone someone, well, that person doesn't want to do an interview, well, I'll find someone else, because I want to push and push and push, because I want to know. People want to know.
5:30 first.
In the next 90 minutes, no charges will be laid for now in the death of Victor Davis. Czechoslovakia promises free elections within the next 12 months. And Smart Hockey, a new video to teach young... I forgot there's, those stories next is missing.
With less than 20 minutes before broadcast, activity in the newsroom picks up dramatically. Studio director Terry Lewis briefs his crew on final camera shots and tape inserts. Senior news producer Jeff Keane makes final revisions to Joy Malbon's script before she lays it to tape.
Okay. They weren't confused because there was no place for them to go. They were, all right?
Ready?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Fred and Debbie Stillamonkas just married off their first foster child. She's one of their success stories.
They say 9 years out.
With the evening's newscast about to begin, Joy knows the next few minutes are critical. She still has to edit and shoot an introduction to her story before it goes to air.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Foster parents in Ontario are paid between $8 and $24 a day. According to the provincial auditor's report, that's not enough.
6 minutes from here.
Can I see that, Ted?
Isn't that what the 5X brief is about? The Warren Nystrom.
In the next 90 minutes, no charges will be laid for now in the death of Victor Davis.
Hello, Thalia. It's Mark. On R8, your question to Richard should be, what effect will the Lauren Nystrom charges have in Winnipeg at the convention?
For Joy and her editor, each second now is crucial. In the control room, tension mounts as a live report from Winnipeg with anchor Richard Brown approaches.
We chronicle history, but we do it in 24-hour periods, whereas historians tend to do it, measure it in either decades or centuries. We measure it in moments and seconds. And when you're there when a story is breaking, that's what gives me a real rush.
For example, one of the candidates, Simon de Jong, has a button out. It says, Thalia, it says, de Jong and de Restless.
The strange thing is you feel so disassociated from the newsroom because you're standing there in front of a camera with some crew members around you and headsets on, but you're in Winnipeg. You're on a riser in the middle of a convention, in the middle of 3,000 people screaming and yelling. And yet the only thing you're concerned about is the camera, because inside that camera and behind that camera is the audience. And they're the ones that you're really working for.
Canadian Stand by red.
To allow the anchor to maintain eye contact with the viewer at home while reading a script, a teleprompter is used. Words on long sheets of paper are fed electronically to each studio camera. The words are reflected by mirrors, so they appear directly in front of the camera lens, eliminating the anchor's need to read directly from the script.
You don't see camera changes on that. Your floor director tells you, or you follow your floor director, because there's the teleprompter right there, and the floor director has got his hand underneath the camera saying, you're on this camera, and they might decide to switch, and they'll swing you over to the other camera. The reason we have the script in front of us is in order to be able to put down which cameras we're at, where we're going to turn. If we're going to go from camera 3 to camera 1, and then, you write these big arrows and you put, turn or dip or whatever, and you do it and you write down which camera it is.
On 1, 4, 3, 2,
Today, Doug Small, who heads the large Ottawa News Bureau, files a report from Capitol Hill. This bureau, along with cooperating news stations out west, supplies up-to-date information from across the country on a daily basis.
Doug Small, Global News, Ottawa.
Finished.
With minutes to spare, Joy completes her report. Weather anchor Susan Hay now moves into position for the nightly weather report. Here, a large weather map is electronically produced on the blue chroma key wall behind Susan. A television monitor allows her to orient her movements to the picture. Final touch-ups completed, Jim Tatty and Mark Hebscher prepare for their sports segment as Malbon and other reporters catch the end of the newscast. Tonight's 90-minute broadcast, fortunately, has been a smooth one.
And that's the news for this Wednesday. I'm Claudia Schuris on behalf of Richard Brown in Winnipeg. Good night and see you tomorrow.
Well, it is a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And now the unwinding after a long, busy day begins.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Well, I love what I do. Sometimes I hate it. Sometimes I absolutely despise what I do. But in the end, despise is too strong a word. I really do love what I do. There's no doubt about it.
There are days you wake up and you go, I don't think I feel like it today. And then 15 minutes later you go, yeah, and you're reading the morning paper and you go, wow, there's a great story, there's a great story, there's a great story. And you're up and gone, head for the office.
It's hard to describe sometimes, and I always think about it, and with other journalists, and you're sitting there, but it's the daily rush. It's going out there, being part of history. I mean, the biggest kick for me so far has been the fact that I was at the Berlin Wall when it came down.
It's a great adrenaline rush when the red light finally comes on and the show goes to air and it works and it hums and it cooks.
I've got the greatest job in the world. I'm paid to do what I love.
I wouldn't trade it for anything.
The proceeding has been a presentation of CGS, the CanWest Global System.